I wanna try and take in all the highs, embrace them for more than a moment's time. I want you, please don't move when I push you away. I know I contradict myself some days, but will you ride the lows with me?
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I am your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Our goal is to help discussions about mental health be a regular part of your daily life, no different than discussions about physical health. Mental illness can be a topic of discussion under the umbrella of mental health, along with so many other topics. This show is the original program on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Our network of shows are played in over 180 countries and cover more topics under that umbrella than you can possibly imagine. We were talking about mental health long before it became cool and popular to talk about, and thank goodness it has become so popular. We have incredible guests, advocates, patients, experts, people. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy our intro music, a song named Lows, written by Aubrey Toon. You can find her music at www.aubreytoone.com.
That night when I started praying, I cried, will you ride the lows with me? Will you ride the lows with me? When I'm down, my vision gets blurry.
Hi, everyone. I am really, really excited about this show. It's called Brain Hijack, and we've got our two hosts on today, Brooke Heintz Morrissey and Adam Walsh. And I'm going to let them talk a little bit about themselves first, and then we'll get into how awesome this podcast is, how it is saving lives. So, Brooke, please share with our listeners a little bit about your background and about why you wanted to do this show.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. Well, first, thanks for having us on. It's really a pleasure. And it's been such a learning experience getting to work with you as our mentor, Kristen. So always hats off to you first. So we are the host, the co-host, Adam and I, of Brain Hijack. We represent the Center for the Study of Traumatic Stress, and I work through the Henry Jackson Foundation to support them in this mission. What we do is we've been charged to really put some of the research into real-time kind of programs and translate them to communities at large regarding suicide prevention efforts. My background, so I am a clinical social worker. I'm also a military member myself. I'm a military spouse, military mama to some Army brats as well. And my previously was leading and working with national behavioral health and prevention operations prior to coming to the center. It was a really great fit, and I had an opportunity to work with Adam previously before. My role specifically is to help kind of support just the big picture operations, helping pull together all of the folks and the teams that we work with, helping kind of address the plans and all of the ins and outs, which, as social workers, we love to do, kind of work through all of the systems. So it's been a really cool treat to get to work on this team. I'll pass it over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Brooke. And thanks, Kristen, for having us. Really appreciate it. Very excited about talking to you through your show and letting people know more about Brain Hijack. As Brooke said, we work for the Uniformed Service University, the Center for the Study of Traumatic Stress. I'm a senior scientist supporting suicide prevention efforts through the center, and also an assistant professor. So I'm able to do some research and other activities to support much of the work that we do at the center. Background is research and subject matter expert around suicide. Been working in many different roles around suicide prevention for the last 25 years. Also a licensed clinical social worker doing clinical work with youth and families who are at risk for suicide. But I've also done a lot of program development, evaluation, and research with different populations regarding suicide risk. Also done some international work that I think also helps shape our understanding of suicide as well. And so we're trying our best to take the best science and information around suicide and translating it into bite-sized pieces for people to understand the broad spectrum of suicide and helping people we hope, with simple ways of digesting the complexity of suicide, because it's not an easy thing to really understand. So you really have to walk through all these different issues that can, influence suicide risk. And so we've had the great opportunity to talk to many wonderful guests to bring up many different topics related to preventing suicide. So it's been a great honor to work with Brooke on this very important topic.
Thank you for both of you for doing that. I know it's always hard to figure out, what do I say about myself? So
yeah, kicking it off, you kind of threw me off there for a second, because normally I think Adam kind of, gets things started, and then I come in with, the spice.
Well, I'd love to say I planned that on purpose, but I did not. So Brooke, starting with you, and Adam, feel free to chime in as well, or pass back to each other. But I was so impressed on the calls that I've been on with you guys. And I'm so glad that I was invited to hear all of the different things that you're doing. And I bring this up because there is a science to this, to the understanding towards the prevention. And you have to come at it from all these different angles and see what works. And sometimes it isn't always about even the numbers, how many people but the quality of the touch. And so I was really impressed to see the work that you guys do as a whole. So please share with everyone just some of the things that, that you guys do outside of this podcast.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Kristen. This is the stuff that excites me because while Adam already alluded to it, but translation is so important. We are so lucky because we work with some of the smartest people and they develop these beautiful things, but ensuring that we get it to the right spot in the right way has really been kind of our cornerstone for the past year. And furthermore, kind of evaluating it. How do we know that the materials are what folks need? How do we know they're receiving it in the right way? So it's kind of a passion project for us. We oversee a portfolio that currently has 12 projects. And what it does is it targets kind of a public health approach to ensure that we're touching these, pockets of prevention. So anywhere from promoting family safety to looking at mindfulness apps, to building skills-based videos. We are working on a project with the National Guard regarding firearm safety. We also have work regarding touching base with medical personnel regarding learning risk assessments. One of our exciting process regarding the research community is really looking at a standardized education platform for understanding what to do and how to use and not to exclude folks that may have suicide ideation from research practices. So It's really big, to be honest with you. And what it does is we get to work with all of these different communities as well. But here's the strength, Kristen. So let me be like very big picture thinking here, is that one of these projects alone is very special. But when you build them as a part of a collection, what they do is that they build and build off of each other. And the expertise that we bring from these 12 projects, we have them all meet as a part of a community portfolio. And they basically share lessons learned and tips and tricks across the portfolio. So the strength of what we do is the entire portfolio. It is not one standalone project. And Adam, I'll let you kind of add in there. Hopefully I caught it all.
Yeah, no, excellent description. I would also say, we have a nice position where we get to work with populations that may not have been given certain tools or information around suicide prevention, or maybe kind of unique populations like the National Guard, like the United States Coast Guard, survivors of military suicide, the TAPS program. We get to kind of dip into different populations that might need a little extra help or education, individuals who are grieving different losses, for example. That's one of our projects as well. So we get to design different tools for people who might be in populations that normally have not had good suicide prevention tools tailored for them. So that's also a really nice area that we're able to do at the center.
I love that. And the shows that we've listened to, I mean, I've got, our editors sort of jockeying as to who gets to edit them, because the information, listeners, I can't stress enough, the information that you get on these shows is the most up-to-date, researched, and constantly, there's nothing fixed. Everything that you guys talk about is okay, but this is what seems to be working today. But that doesn't mean that you're not totally open to, well, how can that be nuanced? And
absolutely.
To the 12 projects too, is like your fingers are in so many different pies that you've got so much wealth of information to come with. So talk about some of your guests. I know we can't talk about everybody, but some of the guests and some of the information that you guys were surprised by. I'll start with you, Adam, on that one. Just people that you went, oh, wow, okay, I need to stop podcasting for a second and take my own note.
Sure. I know, these guests have been, incredible. And I think also learning, you think you've read a lot and learned a lot and been exposed to so many different angles around suicide, being immersed in this work for a long time. But I learn so much every time I talk to people, especially the individuals who have had their own experiences with suicide, experiencing a loss of a loved one. We had a very powerful show, with a dad who lost his son to suicide. Also talked to a Marine who was really dealing with PTSD and the experiences of being deployed during the Iraq War, and his experience with suicide ideation and being at a point where he wanted to attempt suicide. And so learning through people who have this incredible type of courage and resilience, and learning from that has been really powerful. So I know I really have latched onto those experiences as well. Brooke, what do you have to say about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to go down a similar route. But the thing for me, Kristen, is that every single episode, and I know listeners are going to understand what I'm talking about. Like, you have that like aha, or that like gut check where you're like, the words that they're saying and how they're saying it and sharing personal experiences is just so different than reading it in a research article or in a presentation.
Yes.
Because what I have found is in podcasting, folks are really open to discussing the personal impact on themselves. So yes, they're bringing light to the research, but they're also talking about, well, this is how I got into it, and this is what the meaning is to me, and this is what's worked for me and my family, which for me, I think will really resonate with folks on the other end listening, because you're an everyday person. And that's what it comes down to. The folks who work in this field also struggle with friends and family, or even themselves, having experiences with suicide ideation or attempts, or have worked with, countless folks who they know the real practical days in and days out and how tough it can be. They also know, and they can share kind of these really beautiful glimpses of hope, which I think can be hard to translate in a written format.
Absolutely. There's something, you guys know how I am about using your voice and having it be, just voice. There's a time for camera and there's a time for just your voice. So I think that it just really resonates on these kinds of topics, especially because that audio is so personal, and so private, and yet you are sharing it with, the globe. So that part's amazing. I know that on some of the shows that you've done, there were just little things that people brought up, just like so simple things that we can all do. Like just taking the time to stay behind at a tailgate party or whatever and ask someone, hey, that you not that you see that there's something wrong with them, or maybe there is, or maybe there isn't, just ask anyway. And even me, who I have access to all this information too, I went, wow. So where I'm going with that is with how stressed out people are after COVID, with how stressful it's all been. We've all seen the uptick in suicide, and we've all seen an uptick in the awareness. But how has this piece, you guys doing this show and what you've heard from guests, how has the discussion changed today as opposed to before, we had a lockdown and a pandemic and all that?
I remember Dr. Dave Jobs, who's an expert in suicide, especially among children and youth. He's talking about the power of relationships and how the dynamic of relationships, especially among youth, has changed. And he really wanted to impress upon our listeners that relationships are so important, especially with youth. We talked about what is the major driver of suicide risk amongst the youth today. And he just immediately said, it's relationships. So that may come to as a surprise to many listeners. They may think, it must be just depression or anxiety. But he said relationships and, how people are interacting with each other has changed before COVID. Certain, social media has been a phenomenon that we've been dealing with for, way before COVID. But during COVID, it was this reliance on more social media and interacting with individuals or with each other, relationships, and trying to maintain those relationships through social media. And that didn't always work out well, especially amongst youth, and this disconnection and this isolation and loneliness among youth and wanting connection with people and maybe not going about it the right way through, social media and other ways. So that really kind of stuck out for me.
Yeah. And Kristen, I'll be upfront and just say, I don't know if we know. I don't know if we fully understand quite yet. But what I do know is that, from my perspective, these conversations, they're just very grounding. And my hope is that it can ease these difficult conversations, for folks to have every single day with their family, with their friends, with their communities, whether that's your faith group or your fitness group, because it doesn't have to be taboo. And I don't think we know, because I don't think folks maybe know how to talk about it. And I'm not saying by any means is it easy, but listening to the podcast can kind of give you tips and tricks and kind of the confidence and the know-how to be like, oh, I can do this too. Okay. It doesn't have to be that hard. If that makes any sense.
No, it totally does. It totally does. I mean, that's what I love. You guys really mix it up. You have, an expert that comes on and talks about their experience personally and professionally. And then you have someone who comes on and shares their very personal story of a, tragedy in their life that they've dealt with. And so you're hearing not only, well, here's the science, but you're also hearing, okay, this is how I put my foot on the ground out of bed the next morning after this happened, so that those things combined really help people. And I want to go into, and I'll go to you for this first, Brooke, why the title, Brain Hijack. Tell me about, what your thoughts were around that and what that means.
Oh, Kristen, all of the runaround about getting to this.
I do.
So for the folks you hear us giggling about it, because, I'm going to talk about the process perspective, and then I'm going to lend it to Adam to talk about kind of the meaning behind it. But we just felt really strong and passionate about having kind of a name that could be catchy, right? And I was concerned and worried that if you had kind of the suicide prevention podcast, that nobody would come and listen, Kristen. Exactly. So we were trying to find something that maybe had, a little bit of, for lack of a better word, edge, but also, could translate and be meaningful and kind of attract some attention. And we really went through an exhaustive list. And I laugh about it, and Adam can share the story about, we had words like caring and other things that I was like, no, that people will not listen if you put some kind of, too gentle title. They won't understand. They won't get into it to understand that, we can come at a very serious topic, with not only compassion, but with humor and with personal stories. So Adam, I'll let you lean into kind of the meaning behind it.
Sure. No. And, Kristen, you taught me so much about, what type of title for a podcast would be compelling, would be intriguing. And it certainly did take me out of my comfort zone of, wanting to reach out, carrying contacts, wanting to reach into this emotional kind of vibe that we think that people would be attracted to.
Adam, was it one of the names like Caring Canoe? Like what was
Yeah. The carrying canoe. That's right.
Yeah.
Get on board.
It was a strong veto.
Veto,
right?
Yeah. No.
Lovely for camp, for kids camp, but not necessarily a coast. I know. And it was hard too. When we really, you guys threw out things and then I brought, my 2 cents in I really loved how that term, because that's what you're doing. You're in a good way. It's, suicide prevention, suicide awareness. Those are things you need a brain hijack to understand it. You need a brain hijack to deal with it. You need a brain hijack to be interested in what the science is about. I mean, to me, it just encapsulated. So it didn't put you guys in a corner.
Yeah, no, I love how you just described that, because, it really comes from amygdala hijack, which is a real kind of neurological process and a reaction to a very strong emotional reaction in the brain, and your brain becomes overloaded. And what we really wanted to do is to, kind of in a nice way, as you said, kind of overload people with a comprehensive way of looking at suicide, which goes beyond the simple, suicide's a symptom of a disease. We really wanted people to, have their brains hijacked a little bit and thinking about suicide in a different way. So I really like the way you described that.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that, if you think big picture as well, we really wanted to have a name that also supported not only our program, but the mission of the center. Because, while we may have a segment focused on suicide prevention now, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't want to do maybe a series on trauma or a series on grief or a series on, kindness, connectedness. So it gave us an opportunity to have kind of a bridge into related things that might not be specifically under the suicide prevention program as well.
Yes. And that's phenomenal. So I've got one last question, and listeners, I can tell you this right now, neither of them are going to, be totally comfortable, as no guest really is, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I know you guys want to know, and we'll close with this. So we'll start with you, Adam. Tell me, why mental health? Why did this field speak to you?
It's a really good question, and certainly have thought about it a lot. But when you ask it, you kind of have to go back and really look at the journey retrospectively, and think about all those moments, those life events that may have put you down this path. So certainly growing up was very important to help others. I had parents that were, kind of the 70s hippies wanting to always take care of people, social action. And so my parents really instilled that in me, exposed me to a lot of experiences, homeless individuals, people that, could not survive on their own. So I remember, coming home and people would be in the house and not sure, who they were and what they were going through, and seeing that face-to-face exposure to people that were just desperate for help, and certainly several people that were experiencing very strong symptoms of mental illness. And so being around that and having that empathy and compassion for those people really put me down a path of, really wanting to help people. And so went into a clinical field. And then after that, really thinking I want to try to have a larger impact than the one-on-one psychotherapy that I was doing. And so got into researching mental health and suicide, and then helping develop programs. So that's kind of how I got here. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Okay, Brooke, you're in the hot seat now.
I'm on it. I'm always ready for you, Kristen. I was like, nope, I'm ready. Here's the truth. And this is going to sound super boring, especially coming from me, but I think I was just born a social worker. I think that I was probably, as a kid, very similar to the way I am now. I just have the credentials to do it, in a professional setting. But I think that so I think, again, the base of maybe just, who I am was really lent into kind of that social work kind of perspective of just really wanting to help people. And then if you asked anybody when I was a kid, if you thought I would go into the military, I don't think there's anybody that would have said yes. So I think that I actually fell quite into it because when I was in my undergraduate program, they were like, hey, we have scholarships and you get good grades. Oh, and I thought it was just doing push-ups. Like, I didn't really know, Kristen. Okay. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go be a social worker and I'm going to go in the Army. And they were like, oh,
push-ups.
Exactly. I thought it was just like doing push-ups. Like, this is going to sound so silly. I didn't really know what it actually meant at the time, but I was like, oh yeah, you want to pay for school? All right, I'm on that. I got this. So I went into the program and told them, hey, I want to be a social worker, in the Army. And they said, you can't do that. And I was like, okay, well, you know what, yes, I can, and I'm going to. So I went ahead and did that. Of course, not as simply as stated as that, but it really kind of lent me into some, adventure traveling around in the military, where I was able, to ultimately meet my husband, and have my family. But I think that's where it centered in really my passion regarding trauma and TBI care. So that's really kind of had been my strong clinical focus, as both of those areas were really, important and intense regarding, the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was kind of just, I don't want to say in the right place at the right time, but if not me, then who, right? Who's going to do this work? So I really leaned in and I loved it so much. And similar to Adam, as I was able, I got off of active duty because, as folks, who listen, understand, it can be really challenging to have two folks who are active duty. I give my hats off to folks who could do it. My husband's in combat arms field. And for us to both pursue a military career, it was going to be a tough balance. So I opted, to pursue my career and go to the National Guard to be able to ensure that we could be together as much as possible. Yeah. But with that being said, I was able to actually lean into education and translation and to program management. And everywhere we moved, it was kind of, again, I don't want to say kind of meant to be, but as my husband moved, it gave me opportunities to work and be stationed in new places to work with where are the needs, right? And I always just found myself like water falling into wherever the gaps were. And then it led me again to really this big picture thought process of, well, if I can do this on a, an individual level, then maybe I can actually do this on a macro level and have potentially an even more impactful experience and, support things at a, national level. And now I get to work with the university, which has really been a pleasure working with Adam to do our program.
I don't get starstruck anymore. And here's where I don't get starstruck over people that are quote unquote stars or celebrities. Where I get starstruck, people that do good things in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And so with you guys, both of you, I knew a little bit about you guys, and then I was, reading your bios and everything. I went, oh, wow. And the listeners, they would never say this about themselves. And they're probably like, okay, show's over now. But both of them, what they do is just what they choose to do with their career is just incredible. It's not just making widgets. Not that that's not important, but it's, things that help save lives. So I appreciate and applaud both of you for that.
Thanks, Kristen. It's a pleasure. And thank you for all of your mentorship.
Absolutely. And I want to close this out now with one or both of you share where you can find listeners that you can find the show on every podcast app on the planet. It's called Brain Hijack, but there's also a website that you can go to. So can you share what that URL is?
Yep, I gotcha. CSTSonline.org/suicide-prevention-program.
Fantastic. And it's just amazing. Brain Hijack. Subscribe to that podcast. It is so good. When your editors who have edited thousands of hours of shows start fighting over who gets to edit that show, one of their shows, you got good stuff going on. So listeners, I want to thank you all for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next show on Mental Health News Radio.
But will you ride the low, low, lows with me? Will you ride the low, low, lows with me?
one thing you can always count on at Mental Health News Radio Network and my show is that there will always be dogs around. Why? They are natural healers, excellent for your mental health. The original therapy dog Miles has something to say in just a moment. For now, please check out all of our amazing shows at mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com and all your favorite podcast apps. Until next time, I'm Kristen Sananta Walker, and thank you for listening.
And I can write the low, low, lows with me. I can write the low, low, lows with me. Till my vision clears up perfectly. I can write the low, low, lows with me.
Good boy.